Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining Discover Puerto Rico's industry update for the month of May. My name is Xiomara Rodriguez, and I am the Communications Director at Discover Puerto Rico. On today's industry update, our leadership team will update you on the latest research, marketing, and sales strategies as Puerto Rico starts to welcome tourists while keeping the health and safety of residents and visitors alike. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's industry update will be translated simultaneously into Spanish. The slides will be available on our industry portal, discoverpuertorico.com/industry. So you can download the presentation and follow along. Today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent afterwards for your convenience. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for a Q&A, but feel free to send your questions as we go. You can do so by using the Q&A feature, which is the bubble labeled Q&A at the bottom of your screen. La presentación del día de hoy tendrá subtítulos o closed captions en español. Si usted desea activar la función de subtítulos en español, oprima en el botón etiquetado Closed Caption en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Elija la opción que dice Show Subtitles para ver los subtítulos en español. Si desean ver el tracto completo de la traducción, pueden seleccionar la función que dice View Full Transcript. La presentación que utilizaremos el día de hoy está disponible en español y puede ser descargada desde nuestro portal de la industria, discoverpuertorico.com/industry. Además, el seminario web del día de hoy está siendo grabado y más tarde esta semana recibirán un enlace con la grabación del mismo para que puedan repasar el contenido a su conveniencia. I want to remind you to subscribe to Discover Puerto Rico's industry portal so you can access multiple tools and valuable information such as research updates, digital marketing tools, and our multimedia library. You can also stay abreast of collaborations and partnership opportunities, special projects, and much more. I also encourage you to check out our weekly industry newsletter, which goes out every Monday. On there, you will find information about partnership opportunities for activations and media fam trips, upcoming events, and a great media recap of the coverage we have garnered for the island on the mainland as well as internationally. If you're not receiving our industry newsletter, please contact Nicole Olmeda to the email you see on the screen. During today's industry update, you'll hear from our CEO, Brett Dean, guest speaker, Kelly Craighead, President and CEO of Cruise Lines International Association, Research and Analytics Director, Alicia Valentine, Chief Marketing Officer, Leah Chandler, Chief Sales Officer, Ed Carey. Now, to get things started, I'll leave it with Discover Puerto Rico CEO, Mr. Brett Dean.
Thank you, Xiomara, and saludos from your DMO, Discover Puerto Rico. We appreciate you investing your time to join us today as we work together to bring Puerto Rico back from the worst crisis ever in the history of our tourism industry. And just like after Hurricane Maria, and again after the earthquakes in 2020, we are encouraged to see the beginnings of yet another amazing comeback story being written in Puerto Rico. Today, our team will share with you some very encouraging statistics. And while it's too early to celebrate, we can definitely point to some very positive trends that indicate Puerto Rico is leading the great recovery of travel and tourism. Leisure booking trends continue to show resiliency, though admittedly, the pace of booking was impacted by the recent change in entry requirements. We're thrilled to see such a strong response to our advertisements, which continue to deliver a healthy mix of inspiration and information, and also drive increased yield. Likewise, the positive accolades we've received recently from trade publications, travel writers, and influencers provide added assurance that our strategies are indeed working. You'll soon see consumers want to travel, and while some are determined to travel regardless of the health outlook, others remain cautious or even hesitant. And this is why it's so important for us to continue to deliver precisely the right message at the right time to reassure prospective visitors that future travel to Puerto Rico is both safe and enjoyable. And as reported the past 2 months, we continue to see very encouraging signs in the meeting and convention market. Planners are showing great interest in our destination. In fact, during some recent weeks, the volume of leads and inquiries have approached 2019 levels, a very good sign. Unfortunately, One challenge we face is the lack of a business development fund, commonly referred to as the incentive fund, which was used for many years by Meet Puerto Rico to close groups that were considering competing offers. We're hopeful that fund will be restored, but in the future, we have to compete without it, even though 4 out of 5 DMOs in the United States and Canada have an incentive fund. Thankfully, our stellar sales and services team are committed to delivering exceptional results with or without the incentive fund. So you can be certain that we will continue to position Puerto Rico as a premier business and event destination. Now, while we're encouraged by these very positive trends, we recognize that much work remains to be done. We have not yet been informed of our funding level for the next budget year, which begins July 1st. So preparing for what lies ahead, our team has assembled multiple plans and will be quick to adjust those plans to adapt to whatever funding levels we receive. Our funding for the past 2 fiscal years has been less than what the law specifies, but we're hopeful that perhaps we'll finally receive full funding in the coming budget. Indeed, full funding could not come at a more important time as we are ready to expand promotion and accelerate the recovery for you and all of our industry partners throughout our island. We will be certain to keep you apprised of our funding levels and the associated plans on our future industry update meetings, our weekly newsletter, and also on our industry portal, which now includes nearly 900 documents. And regardless of our funding level, our goal remains the same: to lead a recovery effort that outpaces our competition and launches Puerto Rico beyond pre-pandemic levels, enabling us to reach record heights for our visitor economy. You can be certain the team at your DMO will continue to do all we can to get your business back to where it needs to be. Of course, growing tourism is a team activity, so we continue to work closely on island and off island with key partners that enhance our ability to accelerate the economic recovery that's underway. One of those partners is CLIA, the Cruise Lines International Association. As much as all of us have been affected by the COVID pandemic, both personally, professionally, and as an industry, there is no segment of our industry that has been dealt a more severe blow than the cruise industry. In many ways, the federal policies have been unusually restrictive to the point of being punitive. And while some might dismiss the impact of the cruise industry on our broader tourism industry as small or insignificant, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, I'll go so far as to say the cruise industry affects every business and every employee in our local tourism industry. While not all businesses cater to cruise visitors, the fact is that cruise passengers fill a substantial number of airline seats, and that helps keep our air service at desired levels. Without a healthy, vibrant cruise industry home porting in Puerto Rico, air access would be impacted. And as a destination dependent upon fly-in visitors, we need to fill all of the seats we can. So what's good for the cruise lines is good for Puerto Rico tourism. Now, as has been reported time and time again, the cruise line industry has been quick to offer meaningful suggestions and reliable measures to ensure safe cruising. Only recently has the federal government begun to respond to the industry's recommendations, and much of the credit for this goes to CLIA and in particular its president and CEO, Kelly Craighead. Kelly is widely recognized within our travel and tourism industry, both nationally and globally. Amongst many accomplishments, she played a key role in leading the United States National Travel and Tourism Office during the Obama administration. In that role, she proved to be a great friend to Puerto Rico. So we're delighted to have her join us today to share an update and her perspective on the cruise line industry. We will have time for a brief question and answer session with Kelly immediately after her remarks. So you may want to start including your questions on the Q&A section now. And Kelly, on behalf of the travel and tourism industry in Puerto Rico, we appreciate your leadership and all that you and the team at CLIA are doing for our industry and indirectly for our island. And we welcome you to our industry update today.
Thank you, Brad. What a wonderful introduction. I want to say congratulations to you and your team. You are doing an amazing job supporting the ability for Americans, especially to discover Puerto Rico. And I look forward to how much you can expand and grow beyond pre-pandemic levels with the terrific team that you have in place. So let me just start by saying that, Brad, you covered a lot of ground in your introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide you an update on the work that CLIA is doing together with and on behalf of our members and your partners. Needless to say, I believe that you all represent the heart and soul of tourism and the wider cruise community. And it's really been your voices that have been the powerful voice that have helped us to get the recognition we need to move closer to resumption in North America. For too long, as many of you know, the cruise industry in the United States has been the only industry that has been expressly prohibited from operating, even as other industries have either been able to open up or even those that have been able to continue operating throughout the pandemic. Needless to say, this has had a significant impact on jobs, as the cruise industry generates almost 500,000, in fact, 450,000 US jobs that generates $56 billion in economic impact for the United States annually. Most of this, which, as you so rightly stated, Brad, extends beyond the cruise lines and includes independent business owners or individuals employed by small and medium-sized businesses that include travel agents, taxi drivers, port employees, baggage handlers, longshoremen, as well as airlines, hotels, and restaurant workers. Over the past year, due to this suspension, more than 350,000 of those jobs have been lost in the United States. These jobs have been lost because nearly 14 million cruisers who would normally sail from US ports have been prevented from sailing due to either the no sail order or now the conditional sail order. Incidentally, and this is a fun fact I like to share, 1 million of those cruises are overseas international visitors to the United States who spend time before and or after their cruises to their US vacations to one or to any of the United States and to the US territories. And we know that international visitors to the US stay longer and spend more money in the US, which is a huge boost to the US economy, especially since every 30 international visitors to the US supports one US job. If the suspension continues on for a second lost season, we know that many of those would-be cruisers will find other places from which to sail. Because one thing is certain, I've certainly learned this to be true, cruisers love to cruise. And 58% of cruisers who want to sail today tell us they'll look into other ports outside of the US where they can board a cruise ship. When the global pandemic hit, as Brad said, ours was one of the first industries to be impacted, putting an already very visible industry in the spotlight. Notably, the cruise industry was one of the first to take the unprecedented step of voluntarily suspending operations with its announcement on March 13th. The voluntary suspension was then followed by a series of no sail orders issued by the CDC, which were replaced last October with a conditional sail order, a framework for conditional sailing order. It was almost 6 months later that the CDC released the requirements for this phased resumption of service, which created more confusion and complication rather than a clear path that we'd been hoping for. That was at the end of March, at which point we launched and ended, that was the end of this March. That's the point at which we launched an industry-wide initiative called Ready, Set, Sail, calling for the CDC to lift the CSO and let cruise lines begin the process, 90-day process it takes to resume operations. Our rationale for this was simple. Over the past 8 months, a highly controlled resumption of cruising has continued in Europe, Asia, and the South Pacific, with nearly 400,000 passengers sailing to date in more than 10 major cruise markets. These voyages were successfully completed with industry-leading protocols that have effectively mitigated the spread of COVID-19. Additional sailings are planned in the Med and the Caribbean later this summer. In fact, cruising from Greece just began this week. The very small fraction of reported COVID cases that have occurred on these ships since last July prove that the protocols that we have in place work as intended, and that the incident rate of COVID on board cruise ships is dramatically lower than the rate on land or in any other transportation mode. And that was, of course, before vaccines. This is a testament to the industry's unparalleled expertise, gained over more than half a century in coordinating movements of guests and crew, efficiently organizing complex embarkations and excursions, and designing vessels that are more technologically advanced and operationally agile than any other mode of transportation. The outdated conditional sale order, which again was issued more than 7 months ago, does not reflect these proven advancements by the industry and success in operating in other parts of the world, nor the advent of vaccines, and has been unfairly treating cruises, as Brad said, differently than other segments. We believe cruise lines should be treated the same as other travel and tourism and hospitality and entertainment segments, and that's part of the basis of our campaign. Since we launched the Ready, Set, Sail campaign at the end of this March, 150,000 messages have been sent by more than 45,000 grassroots supporters to all 435 US representatives and 100 US senators, in addition to the White House, which we'll talk about in a minute. All of this was a call to lift the conditional sale order. The success, we believe, of this effort has captured the attention of the administration and the CDC. The result, which has been paired with the vastly improved public health condition in the US, is that we are now closer to resuming operations in the US than ever before. There's a lot more work that remains, but we are meeting regularly with the interagency, including the CDC, to determine a viable path forward, and have seen a spirit of cooperation and the clear desire on part of the CDC to restore cruise industry operations by this summer, which of course is our goal. So where do we stand today? To keep our conversations focused on the most critical areas for initial resumption, including for us salvaging part of the Alaska season, our meetings with the CDC are seeking clarifications only at this point on a handful of key topics. The most recent updates from the CDC regarding passenger and crew screening, testing, and quarantine requirements based on vaccination status address what before had been gaps in information and are bringing more clarity to what is to be expected from both cruise lines and from port operators. The two things that are front and center as part of these conversations that I think are important for everyone to know is that first, the cruise industry is leading the way with CLIA member protocols for ocean-going cruise ships that go further than any industry anywhere on the planet. And that's because the cruise industry is fully committed to implementing the necessary public health measures for the safety of our guests, crew, and the destinations we visit. And as I said earlier, our protocols have been put to the test and have demonstrated effectiveness with a lower incidence rate than on land. Second, we believe vaccines are a game changer, and cruise line requirements will serve to incentivize passengers to become vaccinated. In fact, we already know that 85% of cruisers are already in the process of getting vaccinated or plan to be vaccinated. And 10% of cruisers who hadn't planned on getting vaccinated will do so if it means they can cruise. We're proud of what we've been able to do together as an industry, and we're especially grateful for the voices of the wider cruise community that have helped us to get to this place where we are today. But as I said before, there's still much more work that needs to be done. And this week is especially critical if we're to stay on track of reaching our shared objective with the administration, which is to be sailing in July. Therefore, we need your voices now more than ever. I hope you'll take a moment following this call to go to cruising.org. That's where you'll find a link to the CLIA Action Center. It's in the upper left-hand portion of our homepage. All you have to do is click on that link and it'll take you to the CLIA Action page. Here is where you can enter your information and send a message to President Biden and Vice President Harris with a copy to the resident commissioner. And it literally takes 10 seconds to do because we've pre-populated the message for you. Although there's also an area where you can personalize the message should you choose. This has been truly the key to our success. The support that we have found from all of you and the ability to really point to the public health advancements that have been put in place by the cruise lines and the ability to sit at the table with the interagency to be able to address some of the discrepancies between what you're seeing in other industries and with cruise. So your help continuing this campaign and keeping the pressure on is critical. And so with that, I'd like to just thank you, Brad, and your team at Discover Puerto Rico again, the partners of Puerto Rico, for your strength of voice as we continue to let the government know that we are ready to set sail. So I just again appreciate the opportunity and look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Kelly. We appreciate you joining us today and sharing such great information. I want to pause for a moment and take a minute to give the audience a chance to ask questions. So please go ahead and put your questions for Kelly on the Q&A box, and we will be addressing those in the time that we have. I want to get started, Kelly, asking you, as we look ahead, can you provide an outlook on cruising for the Caribbean and specifically Puerto Rico?
Yes, I'm delighted to be able to provide an outlook. You know, although we are really pressed to try to work out some of the barriers to keep some part of the Alaska season, I think one of the beneficiaries of the focus from the interagency and the support that we've received will be to the Caribbean and in particular Puerto Rico. So I do believe that as we continue to make progress and get the clarification we need, that you can expect to see that there will be some sailing as soon as this summer into the Caribbean. The good news, I guess, for people in the region is really the opportunity for the Caribbean to be one of those regions that are back more fully than these very first cruises will be, which will dovetail really nicely with the start of your season this fall. So I do feel very comfortable that we'll be in a place to support initial resumption sometime this summer and definitely by fall.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience. Can you provide information on what would be the specific security and safety protocols that cruise ships will have in place once sailing resumes?
Sure. So we took advantage of the pause that we had in operations to consult with experts around the world in epidemiology and public health. We've instituted, before there was any guidance from the CDC, a set of robust measures that, again, as I said, I think far exceed anything that you see on the planet or in any other transportation mode. They include everything from extensive testing. We were the first industry to call for 100% testing of passengers and crew. It has a number of enhanced medical capabilities on the cruise ships themselves, as well as increased ventilation and other practices that you're seeing on land, from sanitation and increased hygiene protocols, as well as port agreements with local health authorities around prearranged contracted services in the event there would be a case on board. So the protocols that we're using in other parts of the world are part of a CLIA COVID policy. And as we continue to get the clarification from the CDC, which will most directly impact Puerto Rico, you'll have a sense to see just how extensive those health and safety measures are, following CDC guidance that very much looks to be similar to what our current protocols have been in most parts.
We have time for two more questions. How do you see the cruising demographic changing post-pandemic?
Well, it's exciting to see that the cruising demographic at this point looks like it'll start to mirror pre-pandemic, which is where you saw a wide variety of segments, including traditional cruisers, but also, excitingly, the millennials that are looking for the type of experience that cruising provides. So we look forward to being able to welcome back cruisers who have cruised, because our demand is really off the chart, and then begin the work of trying to attract the new to cruise once we have that opportunity.
Great. And we have one more question, and this is around vaccines. Will the cruise industry be using a digital health certificate for vaccinated people that want to travel? And will that be a requirement when sailing resumes?
Great question. So that's a question that has not yet been addressed either by the US government or from the cruise line So in the meantime, our intention, of course, is to fully vaccinate the crews, and we'll have the origin of those vaccinations with the companies, and as it relates to passengers and guests, at least in the near term, unless we are told otherwise by the U.S. government, you will just be able to show your pass that was issued when you were vaccinated.
Thank you so much, Kelly, once again, for taking time out of your schedule to join us. So now to share more about consumer behavior, industry trends, and what we can expect in the coming weeks, let's welcome Discover Puerto Rico's Research and Analytics Director, Alicia Valentine.
Thank you, Xiomara. While the numbers are constantly shifting, I wanted to give you a brief update on where things stand before we hear from the other members of the team. First is what we've seen in response to the governor's executive order concerning the $300 fine to arrivals without a negative PCR test. Though anecdotally, some partners have shared that they did see cancellations after the announcement, we continue to pick up bookings. But they did slow after the order was announced. We had been seeing about an 11% pickup week over week in hotel bookings. This is our data from TravelClick that shows it fell to an average of 9% in that first week after the announcement and 8.2% in the second week after the order. But at the end of last week, the average weekly pickup was back to over 11%. So there was an impact, but it appears to have been short-lived. And if you joined us in last month's industry update, we discussed how data for passenger arrivals into SJU against hotel occupancy clearly showed how December and January arrivals were driven by those visiting friends and family, since we weren't seeing a corresponding increase in hotel occupancy. We know that took a turn starting in mid-February when the passenger arrivals and hotel occupancy were clearly correlated. And we see both arrivals and occupancy have taken a dip since the high in late March. But in the most recent week, you'll see there was a dramatic increase in the number of arriving passengers, but only a slight increase in hotel occupancy. So does that mean we're seeing more VFR travel again? Well, no, because occupancy is the very straightforward division of demand over supply. An increase in supply would lower the occupancy rate, even without a decrease in demand. And beginning May 1st, we had an inventory increase with the El Conquistador coming online. So even though we actually had a 7% increase in demand the week of May 2nd, because of that increase in supply, it results in only a 3-point increase in occupancy. I'm sorry if that's too much math this early in the day, but all that to say is that we continue to see more hotel demand than in 2019. For that first week of May, there were over 6,000 more room nights sold than 2 years ago. And as we've reviewed many times, 2019 was a record-setting year across the board. And though our final numbers are not yet in, our hotel occupancy beat 2019 in April. And every month through the rest of the year is currently booking above where we were at the same point in time 2 years ago. With this, it's possible we could be on track for a full recovery of demand this year, which is unprecedented. The hotel data reporting firm STR, along with Tourism Economics, updated their forecast just last week to account for the stronger than expected demand in Q1 across the US. And even in the updated forecast, the expectation is that that industry-wide, hotel demand will not return to 2019 levels into 2023. Yet Puerto Rico is on pace to accomplish that this year. But it's not just hotel booking pace that needs to be considered. We know how much the rental market has grown in the past 2 years. You'll see to the far left that both hotels and independent rentals both continue to book ahead of their 2019 pace through the end of the calendar year. This data from TravelClick and AirDNA looks at the reservations on the books at the same point in time this year against 2019. So while hotels are booking 2 points ahead of that same point in time from 2 years ago, rentals are booking 6 points ahead. And remember how we just talked about how occupancy rates are dependent on supply? Well, the rental supply is up by nearly a third from 2019. So with that, rental demand already on the books through the rest of the year is actually up 64% compared to 2 years ago. But of course, what's especially notable here is that Puerto Rico is the only destination booking above that 2019 pace for both hotels and rentals. The April Travel Recovery Insights dashboard from the U.S. Travel Association points to gains in travel in March as the revival of domestic travel activity. But even with significant improvements in lodging and arrivals across the U.S., travel spending in March remained 31% below the same period in 2019. And that recovery dashboard was developed with Tourism Economics. It includes not only a national overview of where these key indicators stand, but also a state and territory breakdown. And then in this, it's evident that Puerto Rico is faring far better than the US average, with travel spending in March only 7% lower than the same period 2 years ago. So using this comparison, only 6 US states are faring better than Puerto Rico in the change in travel spending in March against 2019. And the states and territories that continue to see the most significant losses include Washington, D.C., Massachusetts, New York, and Hawaii. That recovery dashboard points to DMO website traffic as a predictive indicator for the future of travel. Website sessions for more than 300 DMOs across the US were down 19% in the first quarter. And with sessions only off 5% in April compared to 2 years ago, US travel points to this as a positive development for the future of domestic leisure travel. So if they're considering a 5% decline a positive development, we've got plenty of reason to be optimistic. Puerto Rico is seeing unprecedented growth in its website traffic. While there's not a first quarter comparison against 2019 because discoverpuertorico.com was launched in February of that year, the website is seeing record-setting traffic. Through the first 10 weeks of 2021, website sessions for discoverpuertorico.com were up 366% compared to the same pre-pandemic period in 2020. So that week of March 7th, there were more than 269,000 sessions on the site. And the pre-pandemic high was the week of February 16th, when there were nearly half that number. And this kind of growth doesn't just happen. Discover Puerto Rico's efforts to keep Puerto Rico top of mind throughout the pandemic, coupled with the ability to aggressively invest in target markets since the beginning of the year with CARES dollars, is paying off. We're seeing significantly more influence for the first quarter this year than 2 years ago. This data from Adara tracks hotel bookings after consumers have been exposed to Discover Puerto Rico's paid media. So you can see that while we've had a similar number of bookings as the first quarter of 2020, there's far more hotel revenue that's been generated. So this is reflective of a significantly higher ADR that exposed consumers are paying. This was $302 for the first quarter compared to the $220 average rate on the island during that time. And this higher influenced hotel revenue is encouraging, but we know there are gaps in the data. Namely that Adara is only capturing hotel searches, bookings, and revenue. And we know what's happened to the distribution of visitors in recent years. This is the Q1 lodging demand over time. And not only were there more rental bookings in Q1 than ever before in the same period, they made up a greater share of total demand. So with rentals now making up 41% of demand for the year, we know that the captured influence of the marketing is shrinking because of the limitations in the data source. It's not just in leisure travel that Discover Puerto Rico is outpacing the competition. The U.S. Travel Recovery Dashboard considers group lead volume for meetings and events another positive predictive DMO indicator. And while this improved significantly across hundreds of organizations, rising from 28% of its 2019 level in February to 35% in March, Puerto Rico's group leads are faring significantly better. In March, when those DMOs across the US produced 35% of their 2019 lead volume, the sales team at Discover Puerto Rico generated 64% of the leads compared to 2019. And while it's not included in this chart because the US average data is not yet available, in April, the leads generated for Puerto Rico were only 3% lower than 2 years ago. Chief Sales Officer Ed Carey will detail how the team's been able to accomplish that. But first, Chief Marketing Officer Leah Chandler will walk through what's happening on the consumer side.
Thanks, Alicia. We, of course, continue to use our COVID-19 action plan. You've seen it a lot, but it's still guiding our activities that are related to all of our marketing and communications. Today, we're operating between the regroup and the rebound phase. Restrictions are loosening and consumer confidence is growing, although we have just endured a significant surge in cases. So we're encouraging would-be travelers to still plan and book those future trips to the island, building on consumers' pent-up demand for a vacation. We've begun messaging the latest executive order from Governor Pierluisi, which began on May 10th. We revised all of our COVID-19 messaging that informs our website travel advisory, our consumer Q&A, all of our MICE materials, and we're disseminating this information to US and international media to, of course, keep Puerto Rico top of mind. Throughout our earned media efforts, we're also including the new fines for travelers arriving to the island without a COVID-19 PCR test result. We know that Puerto Rico is perfectly set up for those who are contemplating a longer stay or want to work remotely. The Discover Puerto Rico campaign creates opportunities for visitors to come to Puerto Rico to work for an extended period of time, portraying us as a multifaceted leisure destination for remote work and extended stays. So we ask consumers to tell us what they could accomplish if they had 2 weeks to work remotely from the island, and we're awarding trips to Puerto Rico to explore the island and work in full color for 2 weeks in August. The prizes consist of round trip flights for 6 lucky winners and 14 nights in one of Puerto Rico's many unique lodging options, ranging from a tree house to a boathouse, a coffee hacienda, or any number of other unique accommodations. The team has continued pitching the campaign to national and regional publications that's resulted in 15 online placements and more than 90 million total earned media impressions with features in Travel and Leisure, Caribbean Journal, Travel Weekly, Travel Pulse, and Islands, among others. On April 23rd, we launched the Discover Puerto Rico activation on all of our social channels. And to date, we've published posts across our key social platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And these posts have so far garnered more than 200,000 impressions and more than 3,600 engagements. And we've also launched an exciting collaborative partnership we've been talking about with Advance Auto Parts. Puerto Rico is one of 6 destinations that are part of their summer road trip sweepstakes that will be running through May 31st for travel to take place in the next 12 months. We're using this opportunity to drive future tourism as we highlight Puerto Rico as a unique fly and drive destination and reinforce health and safety. We've compiled existing content about road trips that lives within discoverpuertorico.com to drive media and consumers to learn more about Puerto Rico's cool road trip offerings and, of course, the sweepstakes. So our team's been pitching this campaign to national and regional publications in addition to the press release that was distributed by Advance Auto Parts, so far resulting in more than 71 million impressions with coverage in Travel and Leisure, Travel Pulse, DL Magazine, and many more. To date, we've had 217,000 entries into the sweepstakes, so very encouraging. We've also hosted 3 members of media recently who write for outlets like Trip Savvy, Fodor's Travel, and a freelancer who contributes to Outside Magazine, Passport Magazine, and Smarter Travel, among others. Their focused trip on the island was featured around adventure offerings, including ziplining and cave exploration. They experienced multiple municipalities while they were here, including Orocovis, Manatí, Cayey, Utuado, Arecibo, and San Juan. While on the island, they visited the newly opened Camuy Caves Park and were among the first to ride Torre Verde's newest world record-setting bike zipline. So they'll be communicating these amazing offerings while also reminding potential visitors and future travelers of health and safety measures on the island. We're executing a lot of additional activations to keep the destination top of mind. Some of the upcoming themes for FAMs include Southern Charm, Hacienda, Luxury, and Additional programs that are still in production include Population U, San Juan's 500th anniversary, and of course, West Side Story that we're working on in collaboration with Disney. We've outlined a lot of additional moments and events to leverage, including multi-generational travel, National Pina Colada Day, National Rum Month, which is in August, among many others, to continue garnering coverage that increases awareness and consideration. And our news engine never turns off. These are ongoing opportunities to insert Puerto Rico into conversation. So what you see here is just a small sample of some of the coverage that Ketchum continues to secure for the destination. And looking at audience targeting, we continue to optimize and look for the best way to reach the right audiences. Starting last month, we began targeting households who would normally take international trips, but are looking for domestic options as international travel has been largely halted. We'll be looking at performance of this target, and we'll keep you updated after we have a few months worth of data to share. Additionally, we continue reviewing our COVID tracker formula that we use to rank markets, and have recently added vaccination percentages per market to keep evolving that target ranking. Currently, the addition has provided no drastic changes, but again, we'll keep updating this and reviewing it on a bi-weekly basis. And CARES Act, as Alicia mentioned, continues to be the lion's share of our media investment, especially during April. This is a quick look at what that media investment looks like. You'll see there's a heavy emphasis on education and awareness placements. And this is a look at one of the creative programs that was added into the rotation for April. This is part of our content buy with AFAR, which includes inspirational content supported by health and safety messaging mixed throughout. Looking at performance, video impressions have continued to climb to over 46 million. We're seeing 4 times the growth in hotel booking revenue in Adara since the campaign launch. And Arrivalist shows us that consumers exposed to our CARES Act media are 75% more likely to arrive on the island. And here we wanted to share revenue tracking with the Adara platform since the campaign launch. As you can see, strong revenue increases are tied to the increases in media investment. So while our CARES Act messaging is focused on health and safety, it's clearly resonating with consumers and inspiring visitation to the island. For OTT, we had 36 million impressions between March and April with a completion rate of 97%, which is over the industry benchmark. Our spot TV flight ran March 22nd through April 30th, garnering nearly 35 million impressions across 6 key markets. Some of the top programming included the Kentucky Derby, the Oscars, Chicago Fire, Saturday Night Live, and Grey's Anatomy. And April was our first full month with CDBG media in the market, with investment building in May and continuing into June. And as a reminder, this is a quick look at what that media mix looks like. Our first print placements landed in April. The OTT buy started last week, and spot TV flight is on the horizon. Our digital investment will continue to build through May as well. We will again keep you updated on all of our performance as we get more data, and we're able to share those metrics once they're in hand. We can continue to see strong performance, as Alicia alluded to, on the website in April, including both month over month and year over year. We've had 3 months of record site traffic, each beating the previous month's record. During the month, we saw time on site go up and bounce rate go down, which shows that we're reaching the right customers with our advertising and then driving them to the site. The star of the data continues to be our massive growth in organic traffic on the site year over year. And because of the strong growth in organic, we wanted to provide a quick update on the progress we've made with SEO. In the first quarter of this year, organic traffic accounted for over 51% of sessions on the website, totaling 1.5 million sessions. Compared to Q4 of last year, we saw an increase of 87% in the first quarter of this year. For context, the old cpuertorico.com website ranked on page 1 for about 583 keywords at its peak. In March 2021, this year, discoverpuertorico.com is ranked for 5,200. That's an 803% increase. In February of 2018, the old site saw about 28,000 organic sessions compared to 456,632 organic sessions 3 years later in February of this year. That's a 1,500% increase. Also new on the site, we're adding fly-in messaging. The first is around the new testing requirement fine. This is served to all people who are having their first sessions on the site. Secondly, we now have fly-ins promoting the reopening of Ponce and Aguadilla airports that appear on relevant region and municipality landing pages. As for MICE marketing, we continue to invest in advertising on this very important sourcing platform for meeting planners and are excited to share the CVent results for April. 102 leads were generated, representing over 51,000 room night potential for the destination. And through our partners at Miles, we placed advertising with these media outlets who have been top performers for us in MICE, ePro Direct, and Meetings Today. Another past top performer for MICE is LinkedIn. So we've invested a significant amount of our CARES Act funding into this B2B platform in Q2. And as a way to kick off this exciting new addition to the convention district, we planned an event just yesterday, bringing in 3 top meeting industry executives to tour Torre Verde's new attraction at El Distrito. We documented this event with our multimedia team, including testimonials from these top executives, and we'll be pushing that out to other MICE media outlets, and we'll be featuring it on our social media channels. And finally, we continue to follow the results of our Meet in Full Color campaign with Mike Ferreira, who has been exploring the idea of bringing his MME experience event to the island later this year. The event's a staff retreat for his whole team and will include some of their clients. This event is basically a FAM bringing in 20 meeting planners who have the potential to book future events. This concludes the marketing portion of the presentation. So now I'm happy to introduce Ed Carey, our Chief Sales Officer, for a sales update.
Great, thanks a lot, Leah, and good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. You know, as Alicia mentioned earlier, we're really excited to share that our group lead volume, it's improved significantly since the beginning of the year. So I'm going to share some of those key trends that we're seeing before turning it over to Francisco Blanche, our Director of Leisure Sales, to share the results of our recent co-op initiatives to stay in front of travel advisors and key travel buyers. But first, we think it's important to take a look at where meeting planners currently report their individual companies are in the recovery process of meetings and events. So although the pace of recovery accelerates on a monthly basis, when North Star published their latest Meetings Pulse survey responses on April 15th, it appeared that less than 20% of the meeting planners we have been tracking since March of 2020 were actually sourcing new dates or booking new events. As you can see on the left-hand side, quite a few of them are still rescheduling or rebooking or even researching new events. And some, as many as 18%, have not yet made the jump back at all from virtual. The issues we believe we'll face moving forward, therefore, are going to be less about the fear of getting sick, but what will budgets look like in the coming years, and what new legal restraints, liability, or governmental mandates will they be facing. So the fact that we are seeing such great numbers in both MICE and leisure segments, it's really very encouraging for us. And the important thing now is for all of us to remain approachable and easy to do business with. So as we saw last month, our group lead volume, again, really began to improve dramatically around the second week of January versus last year. And obviously that became more pronounced as we entered into March and April. But what is exciting is this volume is beginning to reach and surpass, as Brad mentioned, the levels we saw in 2019. When you do the math on this chart, it turns out that our average weekly volume is running at 96% of where it was in 2019. And if you recall from a few slides back, that's with only 20% of meeting planners looking for new dates. And in total, from January 1st to May 8th, we have generated a total of 260,000 760 group room night leads, and confirmed a little over 11,700 definite rooms for roughly $10 million in economic impact. In fact, that lead volume has nearly doubled every month since the beginning of the year. Leads generated in March were 237% higher than those generated in January. And as Alicia alluded to, April seems to have tapered off a bit, and we'll see if that is a temporary correction or perhaps a response to news about potential fines upon arrival at the airport. And when you look at all of these leads, it's really encouraging that 64% of all new leads are falling within a 2-year window. The biggest winner, obviously, is 2022, with a full 50% of all new leads requesting dates within 2022. And the sales pipeline has improved substantially. In this chart on the left-hand side, you see the pipeline that Discover Puerto Rico inherited in July of 2018 versus the high point in July of 2019, the decrease in 2020, and the recovery we're currently seeing in active lead room nights. We have almost fully recovered our pipeline of active business back to 2019 levels, but we're excited to pick up where we left off and bring it to even higher levels. And as you can see from the events calendar, we're extremely engaged virtually through April, this past April and into this month. But towards the end of this month, the end of May, most of the events are beginning to open to live locations. And I wanted to point out 2 very important shows where we're going to have a significant presence. And those are Connect Marketplace, which is next week in Las Vegas, and the MPI World Education Conference in June. Connect, as you may know, is one of the most important hosted buyer shows in our industry. And we are hosting next year, this is important, in Puerto Rico. And the MPI WEC World Education Conference, that was one of the first events to successfully go hybrid, live and virtual, with their event in Grapevine, Texas this past November. And this upcoming event is very much anticipated to be well attended and really the first opportunity for many meeting planners to meet live with suppliers and colleagues that they haven't seen since the pandemic began. So at both of these meetings, we have secured not only hosted buyer appointments, but stage time for Brad to address the audience at the general session on behalf of the island. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Francisco Blanch to discuss our progress on reactivating the travel trade.
Thank you, Ed, and good morning, everyone. Having seen the results, we continue engaging the travel advisors through our co-op programs, implementing activities that drive traffic to bookings. We see the strategy of stimulating with knowledge, leading to landing pages and making booking services easy has proven to be the most effective path to conversion and the best way to invest funding for the benefit of all forces in the destination. No doubt, we're focused on all key segments and sources of the leisure business: travel agents through consortia, associations, and local chapters, wholesalers in the US and internationally, membership-driven travel enterprises, among others. These are the key partners and the main actions we put in place and participate on. E-blasts are a key tool to drive traffic to the landing sites, as it is social media. We have invested in building those landing pages to give destination notoriety, and the webinars are the best way to educate and keep large numbers of agents engaged in our message. As you know, GDS is one of many booking channels available to agents. We have a travel click tool that allows us to see unspecified totals produced via GDS global distribution systems over several time period options. And also, these reflect a measure of the bookings made by the consortia we partner with. What is the relevance of the travel agent? We need to ask ourselves, what is the first step in the distribution? According to Amadeus, there is 1.2 million screens, that is global distribution systems, points of access worldwide. Annually, 79 million reservations, representing 180 million hotel nights, are booked distribution systems throughout 95 markets. Not new to us, but Expedia, which is perceived as a business-to-consumer booking source, has noticed these figures, and I must underline a long time ago, and is fully aware of the importance travel advisors have and the role they play in advising travelers when they're planning their trips. As recent as the first week in April, ASTA retained Lucid to conduct a survey of consumer sentiment on using travel advisors to plan their travels. These results add support to the value of the travel agents and their role in the distribution. Despite the preferences in all-inclusive options, traveling overseas or cruising, out of the 94% polled, all clearly stated they would prefer to plan with a travel agent. And the last figures of the study clearly say Puerto Rico in every aspect: increased Caribbean demand, history, pristine beaches, and great gastronomy. In tune with all the data presented, our continued efforts in educating agents and incentivizing them with rewards pays off again in 2021. As shown here, we have grown an additional 1,384 enrollments and 543 graduations so far through the end of April. Not new to the industry, Expedia has developed a travel agent affiliate network and has been working arduously for a long time in gaining more agents with very rich commissions and perk offerings. Not only paying higher commissions, but paying those commissions on the gross total of the booking instead of on the net rate alone. Fortunately, our hard work educating the same agents they target doesn't go to waste. Considering the enormous amount of revenue that Expedia generates, 16.6% of all Puerto Rico bookings on Expedia's affiliate network come from travel agents. And as shown here, travel agents that we have co-ops with. Nevertheless, it's an effort we have placed, an action we have taken and implemented, and a result we see in the testimony of the regional director of CCRA in Colorado. We put particular emphasis on taking this FAM beyond San Juan. Dayton's words are a testament of what we achieved in educating key regional leaders in ABC CCRA, and they have been and will continue to speak to their experience to their network of agents. Let's hear Dayton.
San Juan Airport is one of the easiest airports I've been in the Caribbean. To really understand and see Puerto Rico, you need to get out into the countryside and get down to the beaches on the south side and get to the west side where the waves are and the marvelous sunset. I probably felt the safest here than any of the other islands that I visited during COVID. Get a hold of Discover Puerto Rico, because the people there that took us on this journey that we've just finished has been awesome. I found a couple of hotels that I fell in love with. One today was Royal Isabella, and the other was Copa Marina. Need to be able to come down to Puerto Rico and experience more than just San Juan.
Based on our current fiscal year, perhaps this is a glimpse of the path to recovery we've been experiencing. While the pandemic year begins mid-March 2020, and there is no correct way to measure by comparison, the chart speaks to April as the month where we see the recovery. But in all fairness, it had already begun before. We started seeing the strong numbers in February. At the end of April, surpassing March totals, May and June continuing an upward trend, is a clear fact that the focus on the destination is alive and well. As you may also see in your properties and businesses, the trend remains strong with a relentless upward booking curve. Despite the evident growth, we continue to see the spikes happen close to the arrival dates with healthy figures overall. On the wholesale front, we continue promoting and driving traffic to the VAX page as a way to reach agents that have the option to book business from several wholesalers that participate in this platform. Namely, Apple Leisure Group and its brands have reached unprecedented figures. According to ALG, their combined growth exceeds 155% over 2019. With AAA, while the figures are somewhat nominal on direct bookings, there is no doubt the implementation of a Puerto Rico landing page on AAA is driving more bookings than we had in 2019. But what's more important is the traffic that the page is designed to drive to the affiliate hotels' brand sites. Strong recommendation is to make sure that those hotels that are AAA members have the options of having the hot deals and the hot rates in place. These are healthy bookings where you only share a percentage of the cost of a published rate. And do not forget, the visibility will be key. On the luxury sales end, compared to 2019 and at the close of April, 2021 is already at 51% of total revenues, with 35% of the total number of guests, at 47% of the total room nights, with an ADR that is 7% higher. Considering Virtuoso has over 16,000 affiliated advisors, this data is only reflecting the reporting of 139 of them. That's only 1% of those advisors reporting these figures. We have engaged well over 25% of those agents, the 16,000. And if you do the math and take 50% off, the numbers are still very impressive. Costco is another excellent example of the strategy to prompt traffic to the destination's landing page via e-blasts, social media, and other efforts. Costco shows amazing results so far this year when compared to 2019. Now, with the same emphasis, we dedicate our efforts to continue developing this important segment. Here are some of our latest and upcoming activities. Thank you for your attention today. And now I leave you with our Communications Director, Xiomara Rodriguez. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. And thanks to our executive leadership team and Kelly Craighead from Cruise Lines International Association for providing all this great information and insight. We have some questions on the Q&A box, and in the time we have left, we want to answer as many as we can. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we will not be able to offer the translation feature during the Q&A session, so this portion will be in English only. Also, as I mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded, so later this week, you will receive a link to that recording. You may replay it at your convenience or share it with colleagues who were not able to attend today. My email is also on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to me if after the webinar you have questions or need any additional information. I will be happy to assist you. Lastly, I want to remind you that at the end of today's webinar, a survey will appear on your screen. We want to continue providing you with information on the topics that are most relevant to you. So please fill out the survey. We want to hear from you. A nuestros amigos que están utilizando nuestro servicio de traducción, no vamos a poder ofrecer la función de subtítulos en esta sección, así que la misma solo será en inglés. También, como mencioné antes, este seminario web está siendo grabado y más tarde esta semana le haremos llegar el enlace con la grabación para que puedan repasar el contenido a su conveniencia o compartirlo con algún colega que no haya podido estar presente el día de hoy. En pantalla están viendo mi correo electrónico. Pueden anotarlo y si al finalizar este seminario web tienen dudas, preguntas o necesitan alguna información adicional, pueden comunicarse conmigo a través del mismo. Por último, les recuerdo que al finalizar aparecerá una encuesta en su pantalla. La misma nos ayudará a continuar ofreciendo información relevante sobre temas de interés a nuestra industria. Por favor, participen de la encuesta. Queremos escuchar sus opiniones. Now, let's get started. We have a couple of questions here. Alicia, I think you'll be the best person to answer this. Are there major demographics or psychographics differences between visitors that stay at hotels versus visitors that stay at vacation rentals?
So an excellent question. And unfortunately, we don't have specific demographic data for Puerto Rico visitors of hotel versus rental stays. Discover Puerto Rico is currently working with the PRTC and the Institute for Statistics to, again, get the visitor survey implemented and be able to have those specifics. But we do know that 60% of rental users are millennials, and that age demographic now includes those 25 to 40. And what we've seen recently in terms of rental usage is increased preference for larger properties. Certainly during the pandemic, that was the case, and contributed to a much higher ADR overall for rentals when we were seeing those larger properties in use.
Thank you, Alicia. Leah, we have a question for you. Given the growth of the vacation rentals, how do you modify communication and messaging to address this type of accommodations?
So we haven't changed our strategy in terms of marketing related to accommodations. We know that visitors really make destination choices based on activities that they're interested in, and we've segmented our marketing based on that. So we have segmentations developed around luxury, around food, around hiking and biking and camping, outdoor adventure. And we know that that's really where people are making most of their decisions when it comes to choosing where they want to vacation. And then they're going in to make accommodation choices. So most of the marketing that you'll see from the DMO is going to be activity-based or interest-based. And then as we bring them into the funnel on our website, they're making decisions based on what activities they want to do, which areas they're going to go to, and then what accommodations they're looking for. So it doesn't necessarily change our marketing strategy.
Thank you, Leah. We have a question. I think our digital marketing director, Liz Mabe, is joining us today, and I think she'll be best suited to respond to this. Do you have plans to include marketing efforts in the platforms of Twitch, TikTok, or Tube Shorts? And can we invite influencers to experience the island?
Absolutely, really great question. I think in this day and age, it's obvious that video content has to be a part of our distribution strategy, and it certainly is. You'll see in some of our distribution on our social channels that we are creating short, snackable video content. A good example of that is the Sounds Like Puerto Rico video series that's launched at the end of last year and continued through the first part of this year. So in addition to the long form videos, we had short form videos that were cut specifically for our social audiences. In regards to TikTok and some of the other outlets that are out there right now, we are currently focused on creating video content for our channels that we have robust and engaged audiences in already. So you'll see that throughout the year, we're focused on creating more stories and reels on Instagram specifically, and we'll continue to roll out more video content.
Thank you, Liz. Ed, I have a question for you. Is there a possibility that we can share via email, or is there a list of the upcoming events that that we're working on?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we have published already and plan to share with our Sales and Revenue Committee tomorrow the full series of events throughout the entire next fiscal year of 21-22 in both group and leisure. So we'd be happy to get that to you. But I also want to remind everyone that as Brad mentioned, we've received less than half of our funding this current year and really have no assurances of our budget for the 21-22 year. So while we have a very sound and robust travel and trade show schedule for the coming year, there's really no assurances that we can do all of this based on our funding. But it's out there, we're ready to go, and we look forward to you joining us in as many opportunities as possible.
Thank you, Ed. Well, this is all the time that we have, but thank you all for joining us today. If you have not registered to our industry portal to receive our weekly newsletter and our weekly research dashboard, please head over to discoverpuertorico.com/industry to do so. If you need assistance with the signing up process, please let us know and the digital team will be able to assist you. Also, be on the lookout for the save the date for our June industry update, which will be June 16th. The invite and registration link will be hitting your inbox soon. Once again, thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.